headlines on this Monday, December 9th, here in South Korea. A parliamentary failure to impeach the president this past weekend is fueling greater conflict between ruling and opposition parties over the fate of national governments and leadership. And the Korean stock market loses more ground as foreign investors sell shares in response to the mounting political uncertainty on the local front that also continues to weaken the Korean won against major currencies. Meanwhile, a coalition of Syrian rebels bring to an end President Bashar al-Assad's government by capturing the capital Damascus this past weekend in a dramatic offensive that has been hailed by US President Joe Biden. The ruling People Power Party has launched a task force to seek stability as it ponders over a roadmap to ensure an early and orderly exit of the president from power. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
Under heavy pressure from the public after boycotting the impeachment vote 2 days ago, the ruling People Power Party has decided to create a task force to handle practical affairs in dealing with what looks like a void in the nation's top office. On Monday, the PPP said this new task force will be in charge of 3 things: stabilizing the political situation, supporting the stabilization of the government, and supporting legislative processes.
Political stabilization involves addressing various measures to ensure stability following the declaration of martial law. This includes discussions on specific options, such as an orderly early resignation. There is also a need to assign responsibilities for the practical aspects of these measures.
Considering some PPP lawmakers' comments to the media so far, there are different opinions on Yoon's fate going forward among different factions within the party. Some say Yoon needs to resign, while others say amending the constitution to shorten the sitting president's term is better. All this also while the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea aims to keep on pushing for an impeachment, as the party has previously warned. Another pressuring factor for PPP lawmakers amid large protests, and it only takes 8 to defect. Since the PPP said boycotting the last impeachment vote was to seek a stable transition of power instead of an abrupt one, buying time could be one aspect to their decision. However, a resignation would leave the PPP with less time than an impeachment. Should Yoon resign, there will be a presidential election within 60 days. An impeachment process can take up to 6 months, considering the Constitutional Court's decision followed by the next presidential election. And amending the Constitution to shorten a president's term would likely be 4 years with the possibility of re-election, like the US Constitution, from the current 5, because the new amendment will also affect the next presidents going forward. That means Yoon will have more than a year left in office, something the majority of the public may not accept. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the opposition Democratic Party remains resolute in its intentions to impeach the president and to hold him accountable for his actions last week that saw a brief imposition of martial law here in South Korea, the first in over 40 years. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
Since the failed impeachment vote on President Yoon Suk-yeol last weekend, tensions in the National Assembly have continued to rise. The main opposition Democratic Party is seeking once more to impeach President Yoon.
Political uncertainty greatly harms the country's credit rating. If President Yoon doesn't step down immediately, it could irreparably damage South Korea's national competitiveness, including its exchange rate, stock markets, and AI semiconductor industry.
DP Chairman Lee Jae-myung said earlier that another impeachment motion will be introduced this Saturday, exactly 1 week after the first one, calling it the only way to address the current situation. The party has also been pushing for the passage of special investigation bills. On Monday, it proposed a special counsel bill to investigate insurrection allegations against Yoon, aiming to pass it in Saturday's plenary session. This is separate from a special counsel bill the party submitted on Friday, which was reviewed by a subcommittee of the National Assembly Legislation and Judiciary Committee on Monday and approved. The bill calls for the appointment of a permanent special counsel to investigate charges of treason leveled at Yoon over his martial law declaration. The main opposition plans to put the bill up for a vote in Tuesday's plenary session. Unlike a regular special counsel investigation, the president cannot veto a bill for a permanent special counsel. Meanwhile, on Monday, the DP also proposed a bill to initiate a special prosecutor's investigation into allegations of corruption and election interference by First Lady Kim Gon-hee, with the aim of addressing this in Thursday's plenary session. This will be the fourth attempt at indicting Kim. The third attempt was rejected on Saturday after falling short by 2 votes. 신하영, Arirang News.
And both the prosecution and the police here have launched separate probes into President Yoon Suk-yeol, naming him a suspect on charges of treason. Our Kim Bo-kyung has details.
Investigations have begun over the declaration of martial law on December 3rd. The police have formed their own special investigation team and said 11 individuals, including President Yoon, are listed as suspects related to the declaration of martial law. The Korean National Police Agency's National Office of Investigation held a briefing on the matter on Monday morning.
There are no human or physical restrictions to the subject of an investigation. We will conduct a strict investigation based on law and principles.
The police are considering imposing a travel ban on President Yoon while they investigate him, with several key figures including former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun and former Interior Minister Lee Sang-min already placed under a travel ban. The police already have raided the official residence and office of former Defense Minister Kim and confiscated a cell phone and 17 other digital devices, including a laptop, on Sunday. Prosecutors, too, have launched an investigation and on Monday, along with military prosecutors, performed a search and seizure operation at the Defense Counterintelligence Command in Gwacheon, Gyeonggi-do Province. This comes after prosecutors also confirmed that President Yoon has been named as a suspect on charges of treason, saying the investigation would address both insurrection and abuse of power allegations.
The Special Investigation Headquarters handling the martial law case will do its best to ensure that no suspicions remain regarding this critical national incident.
The Special Prosecution Investigation Team has taken former Defense Minister Kim into custody at a detention facility in Eastern Seoul under emergency arrest provisions since Kim voluntarily appeared at the Seoul Central Prosecutor's Office early on Sunday. It is expected to file for a court warrant late Monday night. The team also questioned as witnesses Army Chief of Staff General Park Han-soo, who was the martial law commander, as well as former head of the Army's Special Warfare Command, Lieutenant General Kwak Jong-gun. Meanwhile, regarding the separate probes that the prosecution and police have launched, the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials urged them to send a case to the CIO, citing concerns over an overlapping of jurisdiction, while saying it will undertake a strict investigation into this national incident, regardless of rank or position. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Also, in related news, the commander of Korea's Special Forces says he had been ordered to block lawmakers from access to the National Assembly on the night of martial law. Addressing members of the media on this Monday, Colonel Kim Hyun-tae, commander of the 707 Special Task Force, revealed that he had been told to drag lawmakers out of the Parliament building to ensure that their number did not surpass 150. Calling himself an incompetent commander, he apologized for ordering his soldiers to storm the Parliament, adding that he had put his troops in danger and that they were the most tragic victims. He also said that he had been acting under the command of former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun. Separately, amid the political turmoil over governance, the Defense Ministry here earlier today confirmed that under the country's law, President Yoon Suk-yeol remains the commander-in-chief. The ripple effects of Korea's 6-hour martial law continue to be felt in its stock market as both foreign and local investors choose to unload their shares while the Korean won continues to weaken against major currencies. Our An Sung-jin reports.
South Korea's stock markets are continuing to tumble amid economic concerns following the temporary declaration of martial law. Both representative market indexes fell for a fourth consecutive day. The benchmark Kospi closed at 2,360, 2.78% down, marking its lowest level since November 2023. The tech-heavy Kosdaq closed at 627, a 5.19% drop from the previous trading day, which is its lowest for the entire year. It's also the first time since April 2020 for the Kosdaq to tumble below the 630 level. Not only have foreign investors been net sellers, but so too have domestic individuals. The $1 exchange rate in this whole foreign exchange market closed at 1,437, the highest in 25 months. Funds have been rapidly flowing out of the financial market since a brief imposition of martial law, and forecasts suggest that the exchange rate may head up to 1,500 won to the greenback. As concerns mount due to the domestic political crisis and President-elect Trump's worrisome policies, markets have been having a difficult time bouncing back. During an emergency meeting on Monday, Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok, along with top economic officials, agreed to provide unlimited liquidity until the stock, bond, and short-term markets are fully normalized. The government has pledged that all market stabilization measures can be immediately implemented based on a prepared contingency plan to prevent excessive market volatility. Already, 30 billion Korean won, or $20 million from the value-up fund has been injected to stabilize supply and demand on the stock markets, and 70 billion won will be deployed throughout this week. An additional 30 billion won will be injected again next week. The meeting also emphasized a pan-governmental real-time monitoring system through a task force to closely observe financial market conditions. The government aims to maintain its external credit rating by dispatching international financial cooperation ambassadors and sending letters in the name of the Deputy Prime Minister to foreign investors and finance ministers of other countries to reaffirm communication. With the country's political prospects remaining unresolved, the government's measures are aimed at gradually regaining stability. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
And a state-run think tank asserts there has been little improvement in economic prospects amid mounting risk factors abroad and now even at home, our Park Gon-woo reports.
Another dim monthly assessment for the Korean economy in December. The monthly economics trends report released by state-run think tank the Korea Development Institute on Monday says both internal and external uncertainties affecting the country's economy are escalating with little sign of improvement for domestic demand. Such grim assessments for the country were first made last December. The KDI said sluggish performance in the construction industry is one of the biggest contributing factors. Output in the construction sector saw another on-year drop by nearly 10% in October after it dropped nearly 13% in September. That's compared to the overall industry output seeing an on-year rise of over 2% in October, driven by growth in production in the mining and service industries. The think tank also said low investment in the construction field and weakened retail consumption are particularly restraining domestic demand. Uncertainties in trade conditions were also another factor, despite Korea continuously seeing robust exports of chips and solid production of semiconductors. Exports in November rose 1.4% on year, with shipments for ICT products mainly driving the increase. While that's a smaller increase than the previous months, the institute explained that was due to temporary factors such as bad weather in November. However, the KDI warned that Donald Trump's win in the U.S. presidential race, along with his expected protectionist policies, could worsen trade conditions in the near future. While one expert agrees, he also spoke about uncertainties stemming from the political scandal related to President Yoon that weren't reflected in the assessment.
If the current political problems continue and current uncertainty continues about the Korea's near future economy, then that slight recovery may dampen down and we will go back to low investment, low consumption state again. If we had gone on with impeachment, I think the negative consequences would have been less.
But while mentioning the Korean stock market and Korean won did worsen, he added it could have been worse. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
In other news, Syria's Bashar al-Assad is reportedly in Russia following a dramatic siege of the capital Damascus this past Sunday by rebel forces. Our Lee Sing-jae has the latest.
Syria's ousted leader Bashar al-Assad and his family have arrived in Russia after being granted asylum by Moscow. According to Russia's Interfax news agency on Sunday, al-Assad arrived in Moscow, where the former Syrian leader and his family were given asylum on humanitarian grounds. The Russian Foreign Ministry also issued a statement saying that al-Assad decided to leave the presidential post and left the country, while giving instructions to transfer power peacefully. The al-Assad family's reign in Syria came to an end after 53 years on Sunday, after rebel forces captured Damascus. The rebel forces stormed through Syria in a matter of days, with the senior commander of the militant group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham declaring the Syrian capital free from the tyrant. U.S. President Joe Biden on Sunday called the fall of the al-Assad regime a moment of historic opportunity for the long-suffering people of Syria. Biden said that the ousting of its former leader meant an opportunity for the country to build a better future. The U.S. president vowed to continue engaging with all groups in Syria to help transition away from the former regime towards an independent and sovereign nation. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also praised the fall of the al-Assad regime, while suggesting that it was a direct result of Israeli attacks on Iran and Hezbollah. Netanyahu added that with the fall of the Syrian government, the Israeli military had to take positions abandoned by the Syrian army near the border with Israel. Syrians took to the streets across the country to celebrate the fall of the al-Assad regime. Over in the capital, people gave a warm welcome to the rebel fighters who led the ousting of the former leader. The celebratory mood was also evident among the many Syrians who left their country since the civil war. And for many, it's an opportunity for them to return home. 이승재, Arirang News.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump will absolutely consider withdrawing his country from NATO if Europe does not shoulder its share of the bill. In an interview with NBC News that aired on Sunday, Trump claimed that European nations have taken advantage of the U.S. on trade, but that the U.S. continues to defend them. During his previous term in office, Trump pressed his European counterparts to bolster their security spending, demanding at least 3% of their respective GDPs to be allocated to defense. Author Han Kang hosted a short session to share her journey into writing with an audience in the Swedish capital city this past weekend, ahead of the Nobel Prize award ceremony tomorrow, that is Tuesday. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin was there.
After nearly 2 months of keeping a low profile following her Nobel Prize win, Korean author Han Kang has embraced the spotlight at Nobel Week.
This award is given to the literature, and this year I was awarded. This is my conclusion, and this makes me more comfortable.
Now feeling more at ease with her Nobel laureate title, the 54-year-old author shared her journey of uncovering the overarching theme of her work during her Nobel lecture, Light and Thread.
세계는 왜 이토록 폭력적이고 고통스러운가? 동시에 세계는 어떻게 이렇게 아름다운가? 이 두 질문 사이의 긴장과 내적 투쟁이 나의 글쓰기를 밀고 온 동력이었다고 오랫동안 믿어왔습니다.
These questions were etched in her mind at age 12 after seeing photographs of civilians killed during the Gwangju democratization movement. Decades later, while writing her 2014 novel Human Acts, which delves into the tragedy, she discovered that love, not those questions, was at the heart of her storytelling.
우리는 인간성을 믿고자 하기에 그 믿음이 흔들릴 때 자신이 파괴되는 것을 느끼는 것일까? 우리는 인간을 사랑하고자 하기에 그 사랑이 부서질 때 고통을 느끼는 것일까? 사랑에서 고통이 생겨나고 어떤 고통은 사랑의 증거인 것일까?
This connection to love, however, had always been with her. At 8 years old, Han wrote a poem that read, "Where is love? It is inside my thumb-thumping, beating chest. What is love? It is the gold thread connecting between our hearts." Now, she sees writing itself as an act of that love.
소설을 쓸 때 나는 신체를 사용합니다. 심장이 뛰고 갈증과 허기를 느끼고 걷고 달리고 바람과 눈비를 맞고 손을 맞잡는 모든 감각의 세부들을 사용합니다. 그 생생한 감각들을 전류처럼 문장들에 불어넣으려 하고 그 전류가 읽는 사람들에게 전달되는 것을 느낄 때면 놀라고 감동합니다. 언어가 우리를 잇는 실이라는 것을
Han concluded her 30-minute lecture by thanking her readers.
So with two major events in her Nobel Week itinerary completed, up next for the Nobel laureate in literature is attending the Nobel Prize ceremony and banquet on Tuesday, December 10. 송유진, Arirang News, Stockholm.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. An explosion and fire in an apartment block in The Hague has killed at least 3 people. Local authorities say the incident on Saturday morning also left several injured. The Hague Mayor John van Zanen said in a press conference that investigators are considering all possibilities, though the exact cause of explosion remains unclear. Emergency responders are continuing to search for missing persons in the debris of the collapsed building, but the chances of finding survivors appear slim. Authorities have not disclosed how many individuals remain unaccounted for. The apartment building is located in a residential area not far from the city center. Nearby residents reported hearing a loud explosion followed by screams early on Saturday morning. Pope Francis has called on U.S. authorities to commute the sentences of death row inmates. The appeal was made during the Pope's weekly Sunday prayer at St. Peter's Square, as he asked for prayers for death row prisoners and for their death sentences to be commuted or changed. Pope Francis, a longtime opponent of capital punishment, has consistently advocated against the practice, even urging the Catholic Church to update its teaching in 2018. It is unusual for the Pope to mention specific countries when addressing the issue, making Sunday's remarks notable. According to the nonprofit Death Penalty Information Center, there are approximately 2,250 death row inmates across the United States, including about 40 held in federal custody. Some U.S. Catholic organizations have also called on President Joe Biden to commute federal sentences before his term ends. 5 years after a catastrophic fire devastated Paris' Notre Dame Cathedral, the iconic landmark reopened on Saturday with a commemorative event honoring emergency responders who played a critical role in saving the 860-year-old building from collapse. A total of 160 firefighters dressed in vivid red uniforms received a standing ovation from attendees. Outside the cathedral, the word mercy was projected onto its walls in a heartfelt tribute to their heroic efforts. The event also saw the attendance of prominent international figures, including U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. French President Emmanuel Macron praised the swift restoration work, calling it an achievement of the impossible, and expressed gratitude to everyone involved in saving and rebuilding the cathedral. The cathedral caught fire on April 15, 2019, but restoration was possible thanks to the efforts of firefighters. The red ruby slippers worn by Judy Garland in her role as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz have been sold at auction. The iconic shoes were sold in an online auction on Saturday, U.S. local time, for $28 million. In 2005, the shoes were stolen from the Judy Garland Museum in her hometown of Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and were only recovered in 2018 after an FBI investigation. Collector Michael Shaw, who had loaned the shoes to the museum, regained possession of them this February and put them up for auction. They are one of 4 surviving pairs of slippers that Garland wore while portraying Dorothy and are considered among the most iconic props in American cinematic history. 윤세영, Arirang News.
Today, typical early winter weather continues throughout the day. This week, highs will stay at around 10 degrees Celsius nationwide. Meanwhile, humidity levels are low in eastern regions, especially towards the coast. Looking at today's special weather report, dry weather advisories have been issued for the eastern parts of Gangwon-do province and the east coast areas of Gyeongsang-do provinces. In some areas of eastern Gangwon-do province, the dryness is intensifying with dry weather warnings in place. The wind is also somewhat strong, so even a small fire is likely to spread quickly. Be careful not to start a wildfire. Tomorrow's Seoul, Daejeon, and Gyeongju will start off at -1 degree, Gwangju 2 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 10 degrees in Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju, Busan 11 degrees. Rain and snow are expected for the East Coast in the middle of the week and around the Jeollado provinces and Jeju Island in the second half. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session. Do stay with us, and thank you for now.
Okay, I'm all set. I just need to make a plan. Should I ask AI? What shall I do while visiting Korea?
Here are some recommendations. Explore historical palaces. Visit Hanok villages. Enjoy Korea's natural scenery. Experience traditional Korean.
에이, 이건 당연한 거고.
What?
요즘 한국에선 어떻게 노는지 알려줄까?
한국에선 아이돌이 되어볼 수도 인생 컬러를 찾을 수도 있지.
제일 핫한 포토스팟은 여기 한판고 가장 한국적인 매력에 툭 빠져보는 건 어때? 이런 카페는 세상 어디에도 없을걸? 한국은 분명 너에게 새로운 영감을 줄 거야. 이런 한국, 가보지 않고는 모를걸?
Presiding over Monday's cabinet meeting following his latest diplomatic agenda in New York, President
South Korea's economy will grow.
The central bank has kept its key interest rate unchanged.
Mission complete. Foreign rocket booty fell pretty quick.
Seoul is rallying in hopes of bringing the World Expo 2030.
Arirang.
An impeachment vote against the president at the parliament this past Saturday failed to pass, with ruling lawmakers choosing to boycott the motion. With more on the political turmoil here in South Korea with our panel of foreign press members. Hello and welcome to this week's first edition of Press Perspective. It's Monday, December 9th here in Seoul. I'm Min San-hee. Ruling and opposition parties remain locked in fierce confrontation over the fate of the president. While both parties agree that he can no longer remain in power, they differ over the manner of his departure from the top office. For more on this, I have Stephen Borowick, a staff writer for Japanese weekly news magazine Nikkei Asia. Stephen, it's great to have you with us.
Nice to be here.
I also have Andres Sanchez-Brown, a correspondent for news agency EFE Spain, live on the line as well. Andres, welcome back.
Hello, Sonny. Always great to be here. Thanks.
Right. Andres, President Yoon Suk-yeol survived an opposition-led impeachment attempt this past weekend. Do walk us through the events at the parliament Saturday evening.
Well, it was a very long evening at the National Assembly on Saturday. It all started. There was a first round of voting to try to pass a special probe, an investigation regarding First Lady Kim Gong-hee. And, well, the opposition needed the support of the ruling party. They needed at least 8 votes to get that bill passed. And what happened was that only 5 members of the ruling party, of the People's Power Party, voted for the motion. And of course, the bill then didn't pass because it didn't reach the 2/3 majority that it needed. So this was a sort of sneak preview that we got regarding what was going to happen next, right? During that first vote, we already started to see the heated exchanges between opposition lawmakers and PPP lawmakers. And what followed was the voting of the motion to try to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol because of him declaring martial law, apparently with a political motivation last week. Now, what happened this time was that basically all lawmakers of the PPP, except three of them, Mr. An Chol-soo, Ms. Kim Ya-ji, and Mr. Kim Sang-uk, they were the only ones that actually stayed and take part on the vote for this motion. So of course, no quorum was reached in this case because of the boycott of the PPP, and President Yoon wasn't impeached.
Right. Stephen, prior to the impeachment vote itself at the parliament, President Suk-yeol offered a public apology early Saturday. Now, you covered his address for Nikkei Asia. Could you tell us a bit about your coverage?
Well, if we want to go kind of behind the scenes, I ended up having to have a conversation with my editor where I had to clarify that Yoon was specifically not apologizing for the actual imposition or attempts to impose martial law, as one might assume. Really, if you look at the wording of what he said, he apologize for the discomfort and the inconvenience caused to the public as a consequence of that decision. And I had to explain that that's actually quite common in public apologies in Korea, where a public figure who's facing a lot of heat over something, when they break their silence about it publicly, they make specifically that distinction. The wording of their apology indicates that what they are sorry for is the inconvenience and the uneasiness caused by their actions. So in all, President Yoon's apology was, I think, less than 2 minutes or just around 2 minutes. And he didn't really say all that much. He just said that, he felt bad that this had, kind of backfired. And these are his only public comments since he agreed to lift martial law very early on Wednesday morning. So it's a good question as to what he's thinking, what he's doing. There's a lot of debate as to, how much or to what extent Yoon is involved in the day-to-day execution of state affairs, if he is at all. I wrote in a story that I just did today that we're hearing mixed things. Like, some people are saying that he's not involved at all, but he accepted the resignation of Interior Minister Lee Sang-min on Sunday. So that, demonstrates that he still has at least a kind of minimal role in governance. So this is all dragging on, and so we'll have to wait and see when we hear from him again.
Right, and that taking place, of course, despite the fact that ruling party leader Han Dong-un had said that the president would refrain from state affairs. Keeping that in mind, Andres, what has the ruling People Party been saying thus far?
Well, what they said on Sunday after the motion to trying to impeach Yoon failed because of their boycott, what they said was that they want an orderly and early exit for Mr. Yoon. So basically, they're trying to have Mr. Yoon step down as soon as possible. What does this mean, this orderly and early exit for Mr. Yoon? Apparently, the party seems to be doing this to minimize damage. They've said that him stepping down will be less uncertain than having an impeachment, which would automatically mean that there would have to be a snap election called. And of course, polls wouldn't look very good for them. And as you pointed out, Sunny, Han Dong-hun, the leader of the party, also said that Mr. Yoon will be not taking care of his duties, including diplomacy, even though we've, as Steve pointed out, we're seeing signs of this not being necessarily true. He approved the Interior Minister Lee Sang-min's resignation, and also the Ministry of National Defense today said that technically, legally, he's still in charge of the armed forces. Now, the PPP has also proposed, apparently what they're trying to propose is an amendment to the Constitution in order to shorten Yoon Suk-yeol's stay in power, which is something that, to be honest, it doesn't look like the main opposition party, the Democratic Party, will buy in this case.
Right, and speaking about the main opposition Democratic Party, Stephen, what has the opposition party been vowing to do following Saturday's failed impeachment attempt?
They're vowing to keep trying. On their way out of the, before they'd even left the National Assembly grounds on Saturday, they said that it wasn't over yet and that they would table a similar impeachment motion on Saturday of this coming week, December 14th. And then if that doesn't work, they will keep doing it on a weekly basis on Saturdays after that. There are some pretty big implications of that, because that ends up taking a lot of effort and a lot of efforts to persuade the opposite side. I mean, that's clearly not a ideal scenario where every week you're having to gather on a Saturday at the legislature to vote on one of these things. And clearly, if this process drags on, it will be quite disruptive to the normal functioning of a country that has some pretty big economic and security challenges. I guess the hope among the DP Brain Trust is that if they keep up with this, if they're simply persistent, and if they simply are very consistent in their messaging that it's not tenable to have Yoon retain his position, they must be hoping that gradually some number of PPP lawmakers might change their minds and they might decide to vote in favor of Yoon's impeachment, just if for no other reason than to bring an end to this undesirable state of affairs. So they are demonstrating that they are determined. They're not going to accept their first defeat. So all indications that we have now is that even despite the defeat of this measure on Saturday, we still have a long way to go.
Right. And beyond the parliament, Andres, people have been taking to the streets, both in support of and a few against the impeachment of the president. What have you been hearing, Andres, from people here?
Well, when I talk to the people that actually defied the cold temperatures on Saturday evening to go and protest in front of the National Assembly, basically what they said after they saw that the motion didn't pass, they were talking of disappointment. They were angry, although once again, all the protests were extremely peaceful. But yeah, they basically talked about disappointment, especially regarding the ruling party. They actually used some expressions to brand the lawmakers of the ruling party, which I will not share here. But some people, for example, told me how baffling they found the fact that in 2016, the now ruling party, which back then I believe was Senuri, the conservatives too, basically supported the impeachment of President Park Geun-hye for charges on corruption, charges that to them, they said, seem even a little lame compared to declaring martial law for apparent political motivations. Anyhow, everybody I talked to there in front of the National Assembly said, look, we're going to be coming here tomorrow and the day after, and as long as it's necessary for Mr. Yoon either to be impeached or until he steps down. And regarding the people that have been supporting President Yoon Suk-yeol, as you said, Sonny, a minority, the ones that I've talked to were basically using sort of baseless arguments that we've heard before, calling the opposition, some sort of entity that is spying for North Korea and or China. And they were defending the martial law because they deem it necessary to get rid of these anti-state agents.
Right. Stephen, in the meantime, though, some foreign media have also shed light on the energetic atmosphere of the public protest this time around. Could you tell us a bit more about that, Stephen?
The atmosphere that I've taken in at these protests so far has been mixed. There's obviously a very strong undercurrent of seriousness in that people feel as though something that's quite precious to them is under attack, in that, you have a government that is attempting to, through force, remove some very hard-fought, long-fought freedoms that South Koreans hold very dearly. At the same time, people, whenever there's any kind of big crowd in Korea, it seems that like the natural energy, the natural inclination is toward a kind of collective celebration. Some element of jubilation and of joy inevitably pops up. So Some have remarked on how at these protests there have been light sticks, which I don't know all that much about K-pop, but I think is maybe something that fans customarily bring when they attend performances. And then there's been performances and chants, and I saw at the National Assembly on Tuesday there was a guy who had a quite humorous a costume that was a very humorous take on President Yoon, and he was performing a dance to the delight of a lot of people who are watching. So, I mean, it's nice. It's like I said earlier. I mean, keep in mind that we're dealing with something that is really quite heavy in many ways and quite ominous in many ways. But I think the world, quite rightly, just sort of admires the fact that Koreans are able to have fun with this. That this is not just simply a downtrodden affair with people who are upset. Of course, there are people who are upset, and with good reason. But there's more to it than that. It's these protests contain multitudes. They're a mix of moods. So anybody who's I would encourage anybody who's around the country. I mean, even if regardless of what your political leanings are, just as an experience, they're worth checking out.
Right. Meanwhile, Andres, what have analysts been saying about the fate of President Yoon Suk-yeol going forward?
Well, right now, nobody seems to have a clear answer on what's going to happen. I think uncertainty is the key word here. We're right now in some sort of standoff between the two main political parties in Korea. They both want Mr. Yoon out of power, but they differ on the way to do it. Of course, the Democratic Party wants to be, wants to take the glory of being the party that kicks out Yoon through a motion of impeachment, and to capitalize that on a snap election, of course, while the PPP basically is in some sort of emergency damage control drive right now. They don't want to be the party that, is branded as, the party that had their two last presidents being impeached. They want to be the party that comes out of this as, we are the party that took down our president when he conducted something that we deemed unconstitutional, which is decreeing this martial law. Now, as Steve already pointed out, the problem with this is that as days go by, this whole situation is going to keep tarnishing Korea's image in the international arena. Korea is a country that is facing many economic and security challenges. And also, we should think that barely in 1 month, Mr. Donald Trump is going to become the president of the United States. And he has talked about maybe levying tariffs on South Korea, which is something that could affect the economy gravely. He's talked about trying to get more money from Korea in order to pay for the costs of deploying 28,500 soldiers on its territory. And, in regard to that situation, you probably don't want some sort of zombie government dealing with the new president of the United States. Again, it's also about the sort of confidence that you would give to investors. We've seen it today. Once again, the won dipping, and the main benchmark for the Seoul Stock Exchange, the Kospi, dipping down to a 2-year low. So once again, it seems it's going to be some sort of a standoff of who wears down who first. But I think our hopes is that this gets resolved as soon as possible.
Right, hopefully, of course. And Stephen, in the meantime, what are some of the events to keep an eye on this week amid the mounting political turmoil here in the country?
I'm watching the streets myself. I mean, there's a lot of conflicting information as to what's happening behind the scenes. People are saying different things as to whether or not Yoon will be asked to somehow leave office in an alternative fashion impeachment or something else. But I am, the longer this goes on, I am coming to feel like what will ultimately be decisive here is what in Korea is known as minshim, which is public sentiment, and how perhaps more than some other countries, the political culture in South Korea is one where politicians are beholden to public sentiment, and they have to go out of their way to address what the ways that the public mood changes, and then the things that the public are calling for. I think if the DP is going to successfully impeach Yoon, I feel like something that will have to happen is we will have to see a very large and very sustained protest movement like we saw several years ago leading up to the impeachment of Park Geun-hye. I do think that in order for PPP lawmakers to change their minds and to kind of bite the bullet and agree to impeach Yoon and then have to deal with an election and everything that entails, one thing they will have to feel as though their position is overwhelmingly unpopular, and that if they stick to their position, that they are ultimately compromising their longer-term political fortunes. We have poll data now that's showing that something like 70% of the South Korean population is in favor of impeaching Yoon. So if the PPP continue to stick to this message that they can't turn over they cannot relinquish control of the country because the other side are kind of North Korea linked anti-state forces, I think that's a message that resonates with only a relatively small part of the population. It is a sizable part of the population, but it is nothing like a majority, as we see from this demonstrated from poll data that shows that more than 70% of people think that Yoon ought to be impeached for his invocation of martial law. So if that reality becomes starker and is illustrated repeatedly in the streets of the cities around this country, then I think things will really change. So in terms of what's on the calendar, there's hearings every day. There's a number of investigative bodies who are involved in this. There's a lot going on, but what I'm watching is how many people come out to the street and how long they stay there and what they have to say.
Right. For now, it's a very difficult time for Korea then. All right, Stephen, as always, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Andres, thank you very much for your insights today.
Thanks.
Right, and we have more on the broader implications of the political turmoil here in our panel session tomorrow. Do join us then.